All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the webinar, The Superpowers of Leaders and Managers in Workforce Development. While you're getting started, if you could take the opportunity and look at the PowerPoint slide and introduce yourself in the chat box, name, location, and the organization that you're affiliated with. That helps us to create a community in the hour that we're together. And also to, during this presentation, this discussion, if you would make liberal use of both the Q&A, which is should be down on your bottom panel, as well as the chat box. We will have opportunities for polls and some other things, but really want to make this as interactive as possible. And in true transparency, I thought about borrowing from my granddaughter like this superhero cape, but I decided against it. But we're thrilled to be here and to really explore with you what are those powers that you have at your disposal, that they're really these untapped resources within us. And so we're going to start with a poll, and we're going to have Janet. Oh, I forgot to introduce ourselves. Go back one slide. So I am Marla DeVries. I am the Chief Learning Officer here at Center for Innovation. I'm joined by my colleagues, Ella and Aaron, and we also have a special guest. And if you were hearing us just before we hit record, Gabrielle, I reached out in all transparency. I reached out to Gabrielle yesterday and just said, you don't know me, but you signed up, and we're fellow Michiganders, and so hoping that you could help support us as we explore the superpowers of managers as we go through our e-learning demo. And
Absolutely.
she said yes. So we're so thrilled to have her, and we'll bring her up in just a little bit. So we're going to get started with a poll. And so the question is here on the screen. What are your biggest challenges to ensuring training is applied and used in the work environment? And so we ask that you select your top 3. And I think there's probably, looks like there are 6 choices plus 1 additional one. So I will be quiet a minute and give you about 45 seconds to make your selections, and then we'll get the results. I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds. And Aaron or Ella, I'm going to ask you to chime in if people have put anything in the chat, because at least one person selected other. All right, why don't you close it out and share the results, Janet? All right, so it looks like number 1 is high staff turnover prevents the consistent application of training. And then the next one is not enough time to observe if training is applied, followed. Oh, that one, 3 of them had 47%. So training is done to meet compliance requirements and unclear expectations of how to apply training. So learners don't know really what's expected of them to apply the training. Those were the top 4 things, but right up there was lack of measurement tool of training effectiveness as well. Did anything come into the chat, Aaron? Why don't you go ahead and read that?
From the chat, we have difficult to relieve multiple staff from floor responsibilities to have group training.
Okay. Okay. So even how we're able to deliver training. So we certainly want to acknowledge, thank you for participating in that. And we certainly want to acknowledge that that it's a challenging time, right? There are a number of obstacles or barriers to really maximizing training. And yet, we know training is an effective strategy for helping to change our culture and for helping to grow individuals. And so we want to look at, I was trying to think of what's the right analogy, do we talk about what the kryptonite is for you all, that if we can eliminate that you can really maximize those superpowers. So here's where we're going to go during our next probably about 45 minutes, and then we'll dive into some Q&A. So we want to talk about, we're going to go to a higher level and just talk about how does training work in organizations, and to really help you to assess what are your strengths and what are your opportunities within your organization. Secondly, we want to recognize that you do have these superpowers as leaders and managers, and we use that term pretty loosely, but say, how can you leverage that? And that'll be backed by the research that's out there about learning and development. We'll talk about the whole organization responsibility and really how do you improve that ROI of training, focusing on that role of managers for that stickability. And then finally, what are ways that you can supercharge your organization's training? So what are some small shifts that you can make to have a big impact? And we're going to start with one of those things, those elements that you put in, was, we don't know, lack of a measurement tool of training effectiveness. That came in at about 41% of you said that that's one of the challenges. So I want to start with a little bit of grounding in some of the research that's out there. And I want you to think about, how do you measure or evaluate success at your organization? And if you've got some ideas, some things that you do now, put it in the chat box. Would love to hear, because you are evaluating, at least at some level. And so just curious what you're doing. And I'll try and get the chat box up as well. So we'll see if anything comes in. So a couple ideas that I thought maybe are reflective of how you evaluate success at your organization. Yeah, go ahead and click, Ella. Yeah. Is that we look at, just like we said, it's about the mandatory, it's about the compliance of, these are the required in services, so we check the box that we do that. Or sometimes we look at success of training is that it fulfills a plan of correction, right? If part of a survey deficiency, we say we will in service our team on X, and so we do that to fulfill that. And sometimes it might be that we want to increase knowledge, or we see an increase in knowledge. So just to step back a little bit, I want to share a different model, and maybe it's a model that you're familiar with, which is Kirkpatrick's 4-level training evaluation. And I think it's helpful because it will give you an opportunity to look at not so much how you deliver training, but then how you measure its effectiveness. And is there something that you can do to up your game in this regard? So Don Kirkpatrick developed this model about 60 years ago, and it's really stood the test of time. It's been expanded or modified a little bit. And if you Google Kirkpatrick's 4-level training evaluation, a lot of the images that you get are going to be a pyramid, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of need. And so I'm going to go through what these levels are, and I want you to think about, yes, we do this, or no, we don't do this, or we don't do this as much as we can. So Kirkpatrick was a professor at the University of Wisconsin, and he's written several books around training and evaluation. So here's the overview of the 4 levels. So reactions, we're measuring reactions, learning, behavior, and results. So let's start at the top and talk about reactions. So reactions are simply getting, and a lot of it's in the moment feedback from the learner. So during a training or after the training, did they like it? Were they satisfied? Did we keep their interest? Were they engaged? Would they recommend the training to others? So what Kirkpatrick says is that is a way to evaluate, but it's probably the lowest or the most simplistic way of evaluating. And as we kind of go up in some regards to learning is another way that we can evaluate. Did they learn new skills, knowledge, attitudes, or a shift in their mindset? Do they have confidence now to execute something? Do they have intention? Do they, at the conclusion of a class, would they say, this is how I can utilize this information? A lot of how we evaluate is done through surveys, so it can be pre and post tests or an evaluation at the end of a training. So if you look at reactions and learning, those two can kind of be lumped together in the sense that it's the trainer or trainers that are responsible for evaluating what happens, and it happens right either during a training or immediately following. Then as we get into behavior, it's really looking at what are those changes that we see in terms of people's actions and what they do. And this is where we see a shift. And Ella, can you advance the slide? There it is. This is where we see a shift in terms of this. It's no longer the responsibility of a trainer, but it's more the responsibility of others in the organization. It's done primarily through observation and getting feedback, either from the person that went through the class or from others around them. So it could be a supervisor, it could be a peer. And what we're looking for is they've actually taken what they've learned and they've applied it. And you see that with some actionable change, something that's happening on the job. And what Kirkpatrick said is, whereas reactions and learning happen immediately, behavior changes, it might take a couple months, up to 6 months, to really see what's happening in terms of people shifting what they do and how they do it. And then finally, the more I would say comprehensive way is to look at results. So different models actually put results into, they further break it out into 2 categories, but it's really looking at how does the training and what people do, the actions that they take, actually impact the organization? How does it help you achieve your business objectives, really get that ROI? Maybe it could impact turnover. It could impact overall engagement and satisfaction on the job, improvement in elder quality of life or employee quality of life. So I would ask you to just think for a minute and think about your organization and how training gets evaluated in terms of its effectiveness and how you might move into some of these deeper levels at your organization. Because there's an opportunity for us to learn and grow and do more in terms of really making sure that we get that stickability of training. And so I want to use this as kind of the foundation as we go into our leader manager modules. So let me just say, we jumped into e-learning a while back with the realization that these superpowers of leaders and managers, that you have them, and we wanted to bring awareness in terms of what you can do and how you can do, how you can really impact the stickability and the application of training. And so we created, and we'll talk a little bit more at the end of this, person-directed living certificate course, e-learning course for care partners. And then we we created this complementary course called Leading for Transformation that really supplements for leaders and managers. How do you ensure that your care partners are able to live this out? So I'm going to invite Ella to come on in and fill in what I didn't talk about in terms of the course, and then we're going to use that as the mechanism to really drive through some of these components to get at some of these superpowers.
Thank you, Marla. I think that was a pretty wonderful high-level overview of what this is. And today we're just going to walk through a really short portion of it. So just a brief demo. And Gabriel is here to help us along the way. And you all are going to be participating as well during polls. And so we're just going to look at some concepts around the key role that leaders and managers play in training. Because there's some really wonderful practical applications to take away from this today. And we're going to start with the basics of organizational training. And here you see a quote from Peter Drucker, that we now accept the fact that learning is a lifelong process of keeping abreast of change, and the most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. And our key questions for this section are: how can training effectively impact your organization's goals? And how much energy and attention does training receive by leaders and managers? And I think you should just keep these things in mind as we keep working through, maybe reflect back on that poll that we just took together, and just sort of carry these questions and reflect on them as to how they play out in your organization today. So for most organizations, the typical training process looks like, for step one, learners attend the training. Then learners get credit because they attended. And then leaders move on to the next priority. And when this happens, what we see is that training impact is neither maximized nor known. And what we call this is a check the box approach. It's task focused, it's inefficient, and it doesn't maximize what training can really do. Now, in this course and in all of our courses on Empower Ed, we really emphasize real-world application. So we have characters that you can empathize with that are in similar positions, and they encounter scenarios that you might encounter in everyday life, and you work through those challenges together. And so in the Leader and Manager course, we have a character named Jerry, who's a manager at her organization, and we're going to meet her now and sort of get introduced to the situation that she's facing.
Meet Jerry, a manager in a residential care community. Jerry is very busy and has lots of different things and people to juggle, including training. She must work with her team, the director of nursing, activities coordinator, and others, to make sure the training gets done. Jerry mostly sees training as something to check off her to-do list and put into a report. However, she often wonders, is there a better way? Could training have a bigger impact on the quality of life of the elders? What would it look like if training was connected to learning? And how could learning be connected to the larger vision of the organization?
All right, and now we're going to follow along with Jerry to find some answers. Now, this key concept is about learning being a whole organization responsibility. Marla, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about what that means?
Sure. So this is one of my favorite mantras that we use a lot. And again, it's a way of thinking about the superpowers. So when you think about learning, a lot of times, well, I don't want to give too much away, but we think about it as the responsibility for the trainer, right? And we want to really expand who's responsible or who plays a role in successfully being able to get that stickability of training. So it's not just about delivering the training, but it's really that full going full circle to say we want that training to be applied. And so I think we're going to share another poll, which is also part of this organizational self-assessment. So Janet, if you can launch that second poll, and it should say, at your organization, who is typically responsible for making sure training is applied? So make your selection. Is it the person attending or completing the training? Is it the instructor conducting the training? Is it the manager of the staff that are completing the trainer? Is it the senior leader? Or do you have the philosophy and practice at your organization that everyone has a shared responsibility? So we'll give you a moment. It's like neck and neck with these results as I see them coming in. All right, so go ahead and close it out. So, interestingly, as I look at the results and I'm looking over at my additional screen, so 33% of you said it's the manager of the staff completing the training that is responsible. So I'd love for people to put in the chat, how does that get played out in your organization? And then 29% said it's the staff person attending, or it's the instructor, or it's a shared responsibility. And nobody said, no, it's the senior leader who's responsible for making sure that training is applied. And I think the follow-up question is, how effective is that strategy? So if you indicated, and I think some of you selected more than one, but if you indicated it's really the person that attends the training, I would say, how effective is that? Or if you say, no, it's really the instructor, how satisfied are you? Or the manager, or if you said everyone has a shared responsibility. And we come at it with the everyone has a shared responsibility. So we're going to look at, and what it says is, for maximum impact, training must be a whole organization responsibility. And we've identified 4 primary roles at the organization that play a part in maximizing the impact and getting that application of that training. So I think, Ella, you're going to review this and perhaps bring in Gabe. I'm not sure if you're bringing in Gabe for this part or not.
Yeah, Gabrielle, if you'd like to jump in. So these are 4 roles or responsibilities. We have senior leader, manager, learner, instructor. And I would like you to tell us what the role of each person would be in a training. So, for example, for a senior leader, what's the role of a senior leader in implementing a training?
I guess I'm wondering what you mean, like in an ideal situation in my organization, or
I think here we're going for like an ideal situation. What's the responsibility of a senior leader when you're like planning a training, when it's being implemented, sort of in that holistic process?
Yeah, I mean, I think of senior leaders both as guides and learners, and I think of managers in some ways as liaisons between learner, instructor, and senior leaders. And I think what I'd like to see is more of learners being part of choosing what gets trained about, right? Because so much of it is top-down dictated. And I'm often curious what staff feel they would like to really hone in terms of their skill set.
Thank you so much, Gabe. And that's so we have that sort of covered in these puzzle pieces here. So the senior leader does play sort of that sort of like big picture goal, they're thinking about the vision for what the training has within the organization as a whole, and maybe some barriers that learners might be facing from a big picture level, and how to take those barriers down. But learners also play a role in both being engaged in the training and identifying barriers themselves. And they're the ones who kind of have that key role in applying the learning in their everyday work. Instructors, they conduct and deliver the training. They are constantly engaging the learner throughout it, and they follow up with managers afterward to ensure the sustainability of that training. And managers are sort of in between them all, since they're sort of that link between the leader, instructor, and learner. And they both set expectations for learners and prepare learners, and then hold them accountable afterward. So thank you so much. We have a little card sort exercise here too, if you'd like to participate in that. So we have these are different sort of roles and responsibilities. And Gabe, if you would mind, we'd like you to tell us which person this role or responsibility best fits in. It's kind of a gray area. Sometimes I think they can fit into more than one category, but just the best fit. If you don't
I would say
mind.
that, I'd say the learner helps to identify the barriers to applying the training. Engages in training, applies
That's
learning.
exactly.
I mean, that's, I guess, also a learner. Delivers, we got instructors.
Great, yeah.
Next, hold learners accountable to applying training, managers. Identifies with learners' expectations for applying the learning. Identifies with. Could you say a little bit more about this card?
Yeah, so this one is all about sort of what happens after the training is done. What are those expectations for maybe how, work or usual routines, or what looks different after that training is completed?
I would say both instructors and managers.
Yeah, I think this one could probably go with either.
And then senior leaders would be those working to neutralize the big picture barriers. I'd like to see learners cast vision across organization for training, but I know that it's a senior leader role.
Yeah, I think it's exactly kind of as we say before, like these, everyone sort of has different roles within like the puzzle of completing training, but it's also this shared responsibility. So at times different people step up and kind of take on all the different roles. So it's tricky. Yeah.
Holding the managers accountable, I see that as part of the senior leaders and on some level learners as well. Engaging the learners during the training, that's the instructor. Setting expectations for training with learners, instructor. Or I don't know.
This one is I think that we also have this one as manager, but it's kind of yeah.
Got it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was great.
Oh, they were, I see now about I didn't realize there was a correct answer. I thought it was just opinions. All right, got it.
Well, for not knowing that, you did 9 out of 10. So that's pretty amazing. So we say that there is this whole organization responsibility, but really there is a key role in managers. And I think in a lot of organizations, it's this untapped resource, not because managers maybe don't have the desire, but they're not exactly sure how to get plugged in, or we haven't given them the resources to get plugged in. I do like what you said too, Gabe, about I kind of thought about that 360 where learners can influence, right? When it talks about casting the vision. So if you think about senior leadership can cast a vision to say, this is where we want to go as an organization, and this is how this training can help get us there. But that the team members can also say, this is the training that we see the vision that you're casting, leader, and here's what we need to be able to play our part to get there. So it is that true partnership. So honing in on what the managers can do as being the key, just want to offer really 3 components to that. So the first one is, if you click, is to engage with the leaders. So this is where on the kind of pre-side, before a training happens, just to meet with leaders and say, okay, this is your vision. This is how training can accomplish those goals. And maybe this is the feedback we've gotten from our team about the training that we need to be able to accomplish those goals. So we need to have that connection point to where does the organization want to go and what's the training that can help get there. And even when it comes to the compliance, right, because there is an element of training that needs to be done for compliance sake, how does that help us to accomplish our overall goals? There's that discussion that can happen between leadership and the managers that are supporting this. So that's the first step. The next one is to communicate with the learners. So it's the, what's in it for me? What can I learn with the training, as well as what's going to be expected of me? And I go back to that original poll, where a lot of you indicated one of the barriers to making training have impact is we haven't given people clarity. So going into a training to be able to say, when I'm done, this and this are going to be expected of me in terms of on the job performance, or how I interact, or the skills that I apply. And probably in some, return demonstration, we're really good with that, with some skills, but maybe in the knowledge or the attitude component, we don't quite have those clear expectations for people. And then the last key that we want to highlight here is experience the training either alongside or before the learners. So that's the opportunity to really have a deep understanding of what the training is, and then to be able to hold the learners accountable. One of the things that you'll also understand going through the training, and maybe this is something that is very common in your organizations, or maybe it's something that you're like, we assign training to people, but we don't experience it ourselves as managers. One of the things that you identify is what are some of those barriers or obstacles that might make it difficult to really be able to impact, or to be able to fully do what we say is going to be expected of learners. So you get a different perspective going through that, either, like I said, before or alongside. There's actually a few more keys that are included in the full course, but we just wanted to highlight those 3 right now. I think it's back to you, Ella.
Yep. Okay. Gabe, if you're still with us, you're welcome to jump in for this self-assessment. We're taking a look at things that affect what a person does and who they are at work. So here we've got life experiences, previous work experiences, education and certification, personality, and things happening outside of work. And if you all take a moment to think about these, they kind of all affect what a person does and who they are at work. And that's because adult learners bring their whole selves to training. And it's important to be aware of all of the different things going on in a person's life, all of their different experiences, and how that affects them during a training. Let's see. So here we have one of our instructor-led videos during the course, and I'm gonna play it here, and I'll turn on the captions for accessibility.
We just took some time to understand what training and learning are, as well as who is responsible for making sure these things happen effectively in our organizations. But we don't have the full picture until we zoom out and take a look at another set of concepts: beliefs, behaviors, and systems. When it comes to how organizations function, these three components are interconnected and have a great impact into what does or doesn't happen as a result of training. It's important to understand these concepts because to be effective, training and its application must relate to all three.
And Marla, do you want to just talk a little bit about the importance of beliefs, behaviors, and systems?
Well, Ella, I think you know I do, because this is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I would say in any training that we do as part of CFI and certainly the Greenhouse Project, we bring in this frame because what I've seen, and I've been in doing training and education for over 30 years, that a lot of training is built on the what I would say the behavior side of things, right? So we want people to stop doing something or start doing something. And we've really got to look at the bookends and really identify behaviors are driven by beliefs. So the mindset that people have or the mindset of the organization. And so if we want to shift behaviors, we need to look at the beliefs. And then what are those systems? So the aspects of the organization. So I think we've got, we've got some flip cards here. So let's just go through. The beliefs is the mindset, reflecting thoughts about self, others, the work, and the world. Behaviors are the actions that are taken or not taken. And then the systems are the organizational policies, practices, procedures that provide that structure to operate within. So understanding that these three components are linked and we need to pay attention to all of them if we really want true change to happen, and not just happen once, but to get that stickability. So let's go through these, and Gabe, I'm gonna bring you back in, and we're gonna use the example of looking at bathing. So bathing or showering, and just to look at how we might go about a more person-directed approach to bathing. So if that's what we're striving for, go ahead and click. So let's say our vision is the organization wants to give elders autonomy over how and when they bathe, and really push kind of from what they've done. And Gabe, I know just a little bit about Grandview, and it's based on years and years ago experience with some culture change efforts in Michigan. So I have no idea what's going on with you all now. But if we look at it with beliefs, behaviors, and systems, I want you to think about the old way of elders not having autonomy of when they bathe, how they bathe, what that looks like, right? That it's been much more institutionally directed in terms of when and how. So when you think about that, what might be a belief that a care partner has about bathing? It's kind of a broad question, but or what might be a new belief if we want to change things and we want to achieve our vision? What might be a new belief that we need to adopt to have a more person-directed approach to bathing?
Yeah, I would imagine that one of the underlying beliefs is that it's a have to, right? It's something that needs to get crossed off the list by a certain time. And if we could shift it to, I mean, I know that a lot of our residents really enjoy bathing. They want to, they like it as a kind of spa time. And if there's a way to shift it as it being, more of compassionate, like care activity. I mean, I don't know how realistic that is for most places, but that would be one way I would think about it.
Absolutely. That was a beautiful answer. And very aligned with what we have on here, which is the old belief is it's a task, right? You kind of talked about something to check off, and that the new belief is that you mentioned the word compassion, but it's a meaningful, pleasurable experience. And you talked about how elders can really enjoy that. So that's that new belief. And we do believe that that's realistic if we can shift people's mindset as part of it. So if we go then to, that's the new belief we want, how do we want people to act or behave? What would that look like, do you think, in its ideal sense, if we really were honoring person-directed bathing practices? What would that look like for your care partners, or for any care partners? You're muted.
Part of it would be, I have to admit, I've got a lot going on today. So, when I think about behaviors, I think it would be, there'd be less constraints on the timing. There would be, elders would have more of a choice, although it's a lot to coordinate when you've got one big bath, right? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the behaviors would look like.
Yeah, well, I think you're right on, and you're getting into some of the challenges with the kind of the systems that exist too. So Ella, why don't you click on, the old way of doing things is that elders are told, you're going to have a bath on this day or these days. Sometimes it's based on where their room is. Sometimes it's based on staff availability. And so the new behavior that an organization might say is, we want care partners to meet with elders and find out what's their preferred bathing time. How did they do it before they came to live in our community? Were they morning? I can't start my day without a shower, or I want to end my day with a shower or a bath. And so just taking in those preferences and having those conversations, those would be the new behaviors. And then the new systems, I think you identified part of it is, we got to look at how is bathing done? So is it determined? Do managers kind of own the schedule? Is it by room location? Do we have some challenges even in terms of our building, which is not an easy thing to do, but we have to look at what are the things that we can do, or changes that we need to make, so that we can help the care partners to be able to live out those behaviors. Because if we don't change the system, we can have all the expectations we want in terms of staff having new beliefs or putting into practice new actions or new behaviors, but the system is going to win every time. So this is a way for leaders and managers to think about any change that they want to implement. You've got to look at beliefs plus behaviors plus systems. And I think we've got a visual that really says, oh, sorry, there's the fifth one. Yeah. Just that it's an opportunity to constantly look at providing incentives, shifting beliefs and behaviors, having that communication. Yeah, go to the next part, Ella, just to show beliefs plus behaviors does not automatically mean that systems change. We've really got to spend some time as an organization wrestling through that. And that's part of that, removing the obstacles for the team to be able to be successful and to implement the change that we want. Turn it back to you, Ella.
Great. So that's kind of our section all about just kind of like laying the foundation, some of those basics. Our next section is about beliefs, behaviors, and systems specifically, so sort of a deeper dive. And we're really sitting with the questions, how can we show that training has resulted in sustainable change? and how can we ensure our training efforts create whole organization results. So right here, we've got the logic of training, and it's a framework that helps you decide how to effectively implement training that has a true and sustainable change across your entire organization. And right here is sort of a high-level overview. The full course walks through each step in a lot of detail, but since this is a webinar, we're short on time, it's a demo, we're just going to get through one of them. But I really recommend that you look into all of them. You can find out more on our website, but we're going to start with observing learning needs. And here we're gonna connect back with Jerry and see how things have been going.
The annual survey results came back and it showed a big decrease in elder and family satisfaction. Leadership is seeking ideas about how to address this. Jerry knows it's been a challenging year because she has high turnover rates in her direct care staff and morale has been low. This is on her mind a lot. Jerry observes that elders are almost never outside in the community's newly renovated courtyard, even on beautiful days. When she talks to some of the elders, they express the desire to walk, sit, and eat out there. But when she talks to the direct care staff, they express concern about the safety of the elders, especially when there are less than ideal staffing levels. Later, Jerry is talking to one of her colleagues who conducts a lot of the tours. She remarks on how quiet it always is in the outdoor space and how sometimes touring families ask about why that is. There are lots of reasons elder and family satisfaction could be low, but Jerry wonders if some of these observations are all related to each other. What should Jerry do next?
And now we're gonna have another sort of poll question pop up. And just to ask you guys some basic questions about that video to kind of reflect on what's going on for Jerry. So take a look at the poll, think about the video, and answer. We'll give you a second to do so.
And just note it's a two-part poll, so there's two questions.
And there are also multiple selects. You can select more than one, so don't be afraid if more than one of the answers looks right. All right, are we looking good on answers?
I think so. Give it another couple seconds and then I think we can close it. All right, why don't you close the poll and share the results, Janet? Are you able to see it, Ella?
Yep.
Okay.
Great. All right, we're looking pretty good. So take a moment to sort of look at those answers and then I'll show you guys here. So Jerry did observe that elders are not using the patio, that direct care staff are not staying long in their jobs. Jerry did not observe that elders are using the patio regularly, but she did observe that admission staff say that families wonder about the patio not being used and that direct care staff feel nervous about keeping elders safe outside. So great job, folks. And then for the second question, these are all actually beliefs that are related to these observations. So elder safety is taking priority over wellness. People are believing that direct care work is unrewarding and unsatisfying in the environment. Direct care workers don't believe that elders want to spend time outside and that it isn't important whether or not elders go outside. These could all be beliefs that are related to the observations of Jerry. All right. And Gabe, if you want to jump in for just this this last activity, we have this is like a sort of a POV style scenario. So Jerry has a question. She's in this situation, and what should she do next?
I'm
Our
actually going to jump in for them because I
Yeah.
know they have a lot going on right now. So
Okay. Our options are to assign everyone a training on elder well-being and tell them to complete it by next week, send out an email to the staff, and tell the staff in the next couple shift huddles that they need to focus on getting elders outside more, or to take observations to the next leadership meeting to discuss what the solution should be. What should Jerry do next?
all right. So this is one of our simulation questions, by the way, that are part of the learner version of the person-directed living certificate and this leader manager badge. But I'm going to say number one, because, you know, maybe this is something that Jerry feels she wants to do something about it right away.
And Jerry says, assigning a training without giving staff any context for why it is needed or before you have collaborated with other leaders and managers may only lead to short-term changes in behaviors. So let's take a look back at the other options and maybe see which one might be the best option in this situation.
All right, let's see. So the other one is a little bit of a quick fix too. So send out an email and, you know, tell people that they need to change their behaviors. But I'm going to go with, for this one, number 3, I'm going to agree with Nikki. Thank you for responding to the chat, Nikki. And I want to take observations to the next leadership meeting.
That's great. That is the best response because the knowledge and understanding needed to address the problem effectively is only found when working collaboratively as a whole organization. So thanks, Erin. And then after that, Jerry meets with the leadership team the very next week and brings her observations and others' observations together. And they decide that doing a training on the dignity of risk for elders will be a big part of the solution. Now, for the rest of the course, we'd kind of follow Jerry through this situation, walk through the different steps of the logic of training, and think about those big picture concepts and how to apply them practically at the same time. But just because of the shortness of time and that this is a demo, we're only going to go through that first step. But thank you all for participating in the polls. Thanks to Gabe and Erin for their help with the questions. Marla, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure, and I just want to kind of summarize. So we used our course to really drive home what are those opportunities that you have as leaders and managers. And so just to think about the whole organization as having the responsibility for really getting that stickability of training, and to really think as managers and leaders, what specifically can you do on the front end and on the back end. The second thing that we started with is to evaluate how you evaluate, and really identify how can you go beyond looking at reactions or just if there was knowledge gained, to really get at, are they taking action, and are we having that impact, getting those results that we want to have for our organization. And then finally, to see yourself as a barrier buster, and to identify what are those obstacles. So it might be those systems that are in place. What are those obstacles that you can help bust through? And maybe it's a collaborative effort, and it certainly is engaging with care partners to make that happen, but understanding what they are so that you can have beliefs, behaviors, and systems all in alignment. So that's that little summary. Now, Erin, I think you're going to talk about the findings of our white paper from the course that we did, the pilot study that we did.
Yes. So Marla and Ella and I all collaborated together on creating the person-directed living certificate for learners and creating this accompanying badge that you've gotten a little sampling of just now. But we also thought it was important to find out whether this approach was effective. So we did a pilot study with 3 different communities, skilled nursing and continuing care communities in the Southwest and Southeast. And these were a few of our findings, which you guys got the white paper as part of your registration. You can check this out in more detail, but go ahead and go to the next slide. These were, I think, kind of the most meaningful findings that we had from the pilot study, that, you know, learners who complete the PDLC certificate are more likely to agree that aging and stereotypes actually impact elders. They're more likely to, like we discussed with the bathing example, to determine success as, you know, really engaging with elders rather than checking something off the list. They were more likely to agree that elders should be able to make choices around some risk taking, that they can contribute meaningfully to their communities, that there is reciprocity in care, and more. So if you didn't get a chance to take a look at the white paper, do that, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or thoughts about that.
And then if people are interested in finding out more information, I just recommend visiting our website. We have a live demo of the PDLC up there now. We have an FAQ page, just more information. So feel free to check it out if you have time.
And then I just put in, Janet put the information to link, and I put in a request if anybody has questions. There aren't any new questions in the Q&A that we haven't addressed. But if there are some that come in, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A or in the chat. And if you have a suggestion of, hey, this is how we've really tapped into the superpower of managers to really get that ROI for training in ways that we haven't mentioned, we'd love to learn from you as well. And while we're doing that, in the couple minutes that remain, I'm going to just call our attention to some other upcoming things that are heading our way over the next several weeks. So this happens every week. Elevate Elder Care is our podcast. And really, it's an opportunity to hear from thought leaders in the field about innovations and things that they're doing. We're actually going to do a session. I think the podcast will be released either November, I think November 1, where we dive into even more on the research around learning and training and how that works. If you're a learning and development junkie like me, Courageous Training, I'm holding it in my hand because it's a book that you can see that I've dog-eared, and so we're going to dive into what are some of these concepts that we've learned, that we've applied into our approach to training and development. A couple more opportunities. Upcoming webinar next Thursday, really looking at memory care and how we can learn from the experts in terms of creating an empowering person-directed environment related to memory care. And if you are heading to Leading Age, come visit us at booth 2200. You can learn more about Empower Ed, as well as the other things that we're engaged with at CFI. And another webinar that's coming in early December, Otterbein CEO Jill Wilson and CFI board member is going to talk about change the incentives, change the system. If you were a part of the CFI conference this July, Jill, who has background as a CFO, shared some data, some hard numbers in terms of what they were able to do at their organization to have some really powerful financial results. And so she will share that as part of her case study on December 7th. And we've got a survey. Now, Michaela, you've got your hand raised. I'm gonna, if I'm doing this right, I'm gonna unmute you if you have a question or comment. I'm gonna give you a moment to do that before we close this out. So Michaela, did you have a question? I asked to unmute. Might not be that it's working. Otherwise, Michaela, if you can put it in the chat box.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I was late to the presentation, time zones, and I was just hoping that I could have access to the white pages on this and wondered how to do that.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that you get a copy of the white paper after this session. No problem.
Great, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. All right. Ellen, Aaron, I don't know if you have anything else to add. Otherwise, I will say thank you to everyone for participating. And we look forward to hearing stories of how you have really tapped into your superpowers as leaders and managers to get that return on investment for whatever training that you do. So thanks, everybody.